Hello and welcome to the video. This is full flight review and overview of this thing here. Now this is the ORQA Dream X ready to fly quad. ORQA and Immersion RC are kind of the same company and there's a lot of their technology crammed in here. Now I did a video a couple of weeks ago where I was unboxing it and having a first look. Back then the weather in the UK wasn't giving me a chance to fly it and actually do a full flight review. However, one of the most common questions on that initial video was, why is it so expensive? Because compared to some of the Chinese made quads that are kicking around, it kind of is. So I thought before I get into this, I'll put timecodes down below if you want to skip this whole thing and get to the normal review stuff. I thought it was worthwhile addressing that elephant in the room. And I have to say thank you to ORQA, who actually replied to my emails asking them for a little bit more detail. So the replies from ORQA about what is driving the price revolves mainly around a couple of things, and that is first and foremost that this is actually produced in the EU. There are a couple of components that are still sourced from China at the moment, FPV camera, antenna and the motor specifically, but all the flight electronics are researched and developed and manufactured in Croatia, and the entire assembly process is also done in Croatia as well, and that drives the price up quite a bit. There's also the ORQA Care program. Worthwhile talking about that because that's something that a lot of other manufacturers don't provide. And the ORQA Care program gives you 3 coupons when you buy this thing for a no questions asked replacement of carbon fiber frame parts or hardware. And that's a nice idea because it means that if you do break something, then you can get in touch with ORQA and you can get replacements. Again, no questions asked. Sadly, it doesn't cover damage to things like the electronics or the motors or the antennas, but it will cover the cost of shipping the parts to the customer using economy shipping. So you're going to have to wait 10 to probably 35 days to get the stuff. So when you buy this thing, you are going to get those 3 coupons that you can use to replace parts when you break stuff. There is also an ORQA Sim. I'll put a link down below so you can check that out. And what these guys seem to be doing is working very hard to create a complete ecosystem with the quad, the radio, the Ghost protocol, some of the proprietary hardware that they're sticking in here, the simulator, and it's all designed to go together and give a very different experience from what most of us are used to, setting up things like HTX radios and setting up and flashing Betaflight. So with that covered, let's get into the meat of this review. Now, the quad itself has been designed over a number of years. They've been working on a frame actually since about 2017, and they've really tried to build it so it's resilient, absorb a lot of the vibration so you get clean logs, a nice separate arm design for simpler repair, and there are 3 positions on it for PCB mounting of pieces. There's a 20 by 20 millimeter place at the front, there's a 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 in the middle for the flight control stack, and there's also a 25 by 25 in the rear. You can mount HD stuff, but you have to kind of rotate it 45 degrees. In my humble opinion, they also need a 20 millimeter position back there too for some of the latest Avatar stuff. In the middle are ORQA specific hardware, so we have a 20 by 20 F72 flight controller, an ORQA 20 by 20 60 amp ESC, and then at the back we have the Immersion RC Ghost Hybrid Ultimate. That's not only going to act as the VTX, but also connect to the radio to receive the control signals and get those back into the flight controller. At the front, there's a branded ORQA toothless FPV camera and an ORQA Lollipop 4 version 5.8 gig RHCP antenna at the back. Frames designed for spinning 5-inch props, and it comes with the Gem Fan Floppy Proppy. Difficult to say. These probably aren't the best if you're looking for out-and-out performance and endurance, but they do mean that it folds down to a much smaller package for sticking in a backpack, and they do survive. It crashes a little bit better. They tend to fold out of the way rather than snap. Bottom plate on here is 3mm thick. Mid plate is 2, top plate is 2, and it's really designed for a 6S setup. I'm starting to use an awful lot of these GMB racing lipos here. Thanks to all of you that kind of clued me into them. I'm having a good time with those. I would recommend something like a 1400 pack is going to be a nice size. And the red prop at the front here is a branding thing. It's something they're planning to do on all of their quads. However, as lots of people pointed out, the first time you snap a prop, that's going to disappear when you replace it with whatever you've got in the bag. Motors on here are pretty powerful units. We'll get to the flights in a minute, but it's hovering at much lower levels than you would expect for a 5-inch quad like this. Motor size is a 2207 1900 kV. It's a unibell rotor design. Each of the motors weigh about 31.5 grams, 4mm shaft diameter, rated for 2 to 6S. Now, in terms of the setup, a lot of it is actually done already for you. So they've put a lot of time and effort into the Betaflight setup, which I really appreciate. Definitely trying to lower the entry point for this for newer pilots. I've got the FPV control remote here. The way this works is that there is an app that goes with it that you stick on the phone. You fire up the app and it allows you to access all the settings, change things like your power and band levels for your FPV channels, calibrate the radio, and also do things like binding as well. And because of that, there are a couple of odd things in the Betaflight setup. So let's click on Connect in Betaflight and have a quick look at some of those setups. Data Flash has something in it, so it has been tested at the factory. I don't know if that's going to be for all units, but it's nice to see lots of the higher end quads that I get in here have that. You can see here that the serial receivers UART4, ESC telemetry set up, so's the GPS interestingly, but there isn't one on here. I think it would have been nice to have a GPS for rescue mode. It's good to be able to get your model back when you're spending this kind of money. 8K gyro, 4K piddly frequency. It's an F722, so it's ticking away about 27%. Nothing really surprising in here. Everything's pretty standard. Power and battery look like this. Again, I'll put a dump and diff below if you want to go and have a quick look. Failsafe is set to drop, although if you have a GPS connected, you're going to want that GPS rescue. PID tuning looks like this. So pretty standard stuff. It does fly very nicely. I'll show you in a minute. There is a little bit of expo on the controls, which I personally like. Receiver is set for IRC Ghost, and it is sending telemetry back, which allows you to do all the settings from the remote. I'll show you binding in a minute. Modes is set quite sensibly too. This looks pretty standard to me. The only thing I would do would be to add an angle for the low position of the modes, so I would just change that as well just for initial flights, because I guess if you're getting this kind of thing, you're not going to be comfortable with all the setup. Be aware the motor direction is reversed. Remember that for when you replace your props. D-Shock 600 as well as bidirectional ESC. And the OSD layout might need a little bit of a tweak. The thing I want to show you is that if you go in here, the video transmitter stuff is blank, and that's intentional because you change all the video transmitter stuff via the app that is connected to the remote rather than here in Betaflight. So you can't change things through the standard Betaflight OSD menu. I've mentioned the radio a couple of times. Let me talk about that. Again, this is the FPV.control radio. It appears super basic, but actually works quite well. It's probably not the highest quality of gimbals I've ever had my paws on. Sadly, the batteries aren't removable, so you do have to plug it in and charge it before you go to the field. I really like replaceable batteries because occasionally you leave it on or something else. Switch here is at the bottom. I do like the fact that it connects to the app. It means that you have a very intuitive interface that you can change things, not only for the remote, but also for the Quadcopter 2. Optional Bluetooth module available for the back, so you can connect it to your PC to use that ORQA sim. And mine has the little Ghost module here at the back. Binding is super easy. You go into the menu within the app itself and you just select bind. You just hit the bind button if it hasn't already been bound by the quad. Because this one has been flown and tested, you just had to click the bind button and everything burst into life. So what is it like to fly? Well, it flies very, very well, but you kind of expect it when you're paying this much for a quad coming from one of the top tier vendors like ORQA with Immersion RC's help. They've obviously put a bit of time and effort into the setup here. So surprise, surprise, it is incredibly smooth and responsive with no little twerks or weird things that it does. It just flies exactly as you would hope it would. Hover point is very low, as I've already said, only hovering between 20-22% throttle on a full battery, and about the same when you're in fast forward flight. Camera performance is also very good. This is obviously analog. I don't fly a lot of analog these days, but it's very easy to see what's going on and see where you're going. I'll probably move the on-screen display around a little bit more, but you can see here, this is one of my earlier flights, just how nicely it performs. It is very, very easy to set up. Noise levels are okay too. Despite those being foldable props, it isn't making a lot of noise, even when you apply quite a bit of throttle. So it's not going to attract a lot of attention if you're flying it in a field where people are relatively close by. However, if you blip the throttle, then people are going to hear it. There's going to be that very high whine that these tend to make when you really pull on the power. Flight time out of 1400 mAh 4S pack is about 7 minutes. Probably less if you're going to be caning it. So be aware of that and set your timer. You're going to have to keep an eye on the screen because there isn't the ability to set a timer on the radio. So just be aware of that and make sure that your on-screen display is all set and that you're watching exactly what's happening. Now this is a high quality quad and a high quality setup, but then it should be. ORQA and Immersion RC have tried to use their technology here to deliver a quad that's a little different to the others that we come across out there. Is that a good thing? Well, if you think it's too expensive, you're probably not the target customer for this. And I think it would have liked to have seen a GPS on the back, as well as a loud lost model alarm, because when you're spending this much money, you don't want to accidentally lose it, and having an oh dear switch GPS return to home set up out the box would have been great. I think the lack of offering it in things like Express LRS version stuff is going to limit the market. And I think the market they're targeting is the really key point here, because the market they're targeting are people who are interested in flying a Betaflight quad, but don't want to learn Express LRS, don't want to learn HTX, they don't want to learn how to set up the bind receivers and do all that shenanigans, and they don't want to learn how to set up and configure Betaflight. They just want something that's going to come out the box, plug together and work, and also be backed up by the manufacturer if they inadvertently break something. You could, of course, get one of these and swap out your own receiver and change things around. However, if you're going to do that and reach for the soldering iron, surely there are cheaper options around that you can go and customize. And I really don't think that's the kind of people this is aimed at, the people who have a soldering iron on their desk all the time. I understand why they're committed to using their own technology in a quad as part of an ORQA ecosystem, but I do hope they'll offer it with Express LRS and more things that large parts of the quad flying hobby use now. It would potentially widen their market, and the other challenge is that if you bought into one of these, maybe you're a DJI pilot, or maybe you just want to get into this side of the hobby and want an easy introduction, that unfortunately you're not going to be learning about the things that you'll need when you buy your next quad that might not be ORQA, specifically Express LRS, HTX or OpenTX and those kind of things. But if you like the idea of a more integrated app style setup and you want something that's made in the EU and you don't care about the price, then this might be right up your street. Thank you for watching my video. Check out the playlist, and adding Pedantry 360 to your search terms will help you find my content. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. You can support the time I spend here answering questions and helping others by using the links in the video description.